Hello, good afternoon. Um, I'm going to give a lecture on the topic on population and the environment. I will go through the slides which I've prepared earlier. Okay. All right. Okay. So the topic for our um, um, lecture this afternoon, as I said, is on population and environment. And basically, what we want to look here is to discuss on the issue of population growth, how it, how it impact the environment. Okay, so the increase in human population has been and is always a concern um, on the for several reasons. For example, number one, increase in population will definitely increase in more waste, sampah, and number two is going to the increase in the population also is going to exert more pressure on resources. And number three, increased land development for both agriculture and habitation as well. And also the demand for energy will be greater with increasing population. And likewise, the demand for food and all that, and also the land for farming and all that will also put great pressure on wildlife and also marine life. Okay. Um, it is suggested that human population growth is the biggest threat to the environment as well as to human life. So one of the concept has been coined by um, people in the past is on the concept of human carrying capacity. In other words, how many people will the world be able to support? Okay. So carrying capacity, yeah, refers to the maximum number of humans that can live somewhere based on food, water, and free space. Uh, the free space, the population exceeds its carrying capacity, organisms will die. So there isn't enough food, water, and free space, so more organisms die than they are being born. Okay. Now, there is a relationship between the poverty, fertility, and environmental degradation, which you can see. You can uh, look at the diagram on the right here, the relationship between poverty, environmental degradation, and fertility. So there is negative feedback, also known as the vicious cycle. For example, a fifth of the world population live on less than $1 per day. And about 1 billion uh, people on the earth lack access to clean water, and about 2.4 billion lack access to sanitary facilities. And about 800 million people on the earth are malnourished. So the poor really suffer higher rates of disease, lower life expectancy, higher infant mortality, and higher literacy, plus poor living conditions, social exclusions, and powerlessness. So in other words, in short, the vicious cycle of poverty or of high fertility, poverty, and environmental degradation persists, yeah, which present to the international community with a lot of challenge. Okay, so if you look at this high fertility, will result in dwindling resources divided by more people, and that leads to poverty. So poverty will results in overusage of resources for survival, and that leads to the environmental degradation. And eventually, it goes back to the issue of high fertility, where there is lack of contraceptives, so more little hands needed help to the family in a depleted environment. Okay? Okay. Some perspectives on population, just a bit on this. So, what can be done about overpopulation problem? Now, I have talked about Thomas Malthus before when we talk about the theories of population growth. He was a mathematician as well as serving as an Anglican minister or priest in England, and he wrote an essay on the principle of population as it affects the future improvement of society. His view was, as far as population is concerned, is that number one, human needs food, and number two, human sexual desires. So then the power of population is, according to him, is indefinitely greater than the power of the earth to produce subsistence. Okay? And therefore, population will increase exponentially. So the next slide shows you the relationship between, or rather the comparison between exponential growth and arithmetic growth. So human population growth is exponential according to Malthus. Exponential meaning from 1 to 2 to 4 to 6 to, I'm sorry, to 8 and then 16 and so on and so forth. Um, However, the supply of food grows at arithmetic uh, rather than exponential, right? So eventually, population would outstrip the available resources, and then eventually the power of humans to reproduce would be more powerful than the ability of the earth to sustain. So human growth, or rather population growth, according to Malthus, is growing much faster than the growth in the food production. That was his thesis. Okay, so the consequences of that is poverty. Yeah? Consequences of population growth. So population growth leads to poverty when the population increases faster than the food supply. The overpopulation then leads to lower wages and also leading to a surplus of labor, and that further exacerbate poverty. Okay, so Malthus believed that the poor, according to him, should incorporate moral restraint. In other words, try to restrain themselves from having uh, too many children, for example. Yeah? So the poor should incorporate moral restraint so as to curb their reproductive habits. Right? So poverty is to be blamed on the poor. Right? So it is the poverty's own, or the poor's own fault that they are poor, according to Malthus theory. So the poor should adopt, according to his theory, should adopt the middle class values in order to avoid the consequences of overpopulation. And Malthus was very skeptical that the poor were capable of doing this. Otherwise, this is called associated with social Darwinism, and thus the poor would remain poor. Yeah? So he was very much opposed to the welfare system because it might encourage more poverty. Okay, but there are critics of Malthus. For example, Malthus' ideas have been criticized by many scholars. One of the biggest criticism is his interpretation that arithmetic increase in the food supply was really incorrect. But you must remember, Malthus was talking about situation or circumstances um, during his time. So he couldn't figure out um, that things have changed. For example, the use of machine technology, which can help to produce um, more food. Yeah? So food production has skyrocketed in the last several decades, partly due to increasing technological advances. For example, in the area of agriculture, precision agriculture, development of new resistant crops and varieties, and embryonic cyclogenesis, and so on and so forth. So because of that, food supply has kept pace, yeah, with the growth in human population. And I think that's quite true. But now, except for certain regions in the world, we do have excess food uh, produced in the world today. Okay, so the new multi-sim, just quickly on this, there are two of the more outspoken one, and they are controversial, by the way. The first one is Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich um, wrote a book on the population boom. Yeah? So he uh, proposed that unless immediate action is taken to control overpopulation, a series of crises will occur. Right? So according to him, we can no longer afford merely to treat the symptoms of the cancer of population growth, but we have but the cancer itself must be cut out. Okay? In other words, the cause of the growth must be uh, checked. So population control is the only answer, according to Paul Rowe. So the operation will demand many apparently brutal and heartless decisions. Yeah, the pain may be intense, but the disease is so far advanced that only with radical surgery does the patient have a chance of survival. So he was just comparing poverty with cancer. Right? This was quoted in Speed in Willett in 2002 and Environmental Ethics. Right? Okay. Now another person who is critical about who's a neo-Malthusian and also critical about population growth is Garrett Hardin, who wrote a book on the tragedy of the commons. Okay, and he also is the author of the lifeboat ethics, right? Um, so in his book, uh, the lifeboat ethics here is referring to a world model in which the developed affluent nations, the rich nations that control and use most of the world's resources are in the lifeboat, yeah, dalam perahu, yeah. While as the struggling developed nations, the poor nations and so on, are plundering or swimming in the surrounding ocean. So what he concludes is that, according to him, it is foolish to try to rescue all the swimmers, and he suggests that the swimmers here really refers to the developing nations or developing countries. And he suggests that the ethically appropriate strategy is one of a triad. Um, triad is a term, for example, in hospital, there is a priority that one who is more serious or be um, will be attended to first. Yeah. So that's the idea behind this triad. So the haves here, the rich country, permit the poorest and least developed of the have-nots. Yeah. So in other words, he was talking about you have to choose, pick and choose. So the first one to be uh, that need attention or need help are the very poorest. Right? So those who can survive, who still can survive, just let them be. And that's basically the concept that Derek Harden was talking about. Yeah. Um, okay. So another one is the cornucopians. This is contrasting academic term to the neo-Malthusian. Yeah. So what the thesis is here that technological advances, according to this group, yeah, and the expansion of market economy will mitigate, will more or less resolve any problems presented by overpopulation. So if there are more people, according to them, then we will discover or invent new ways to feed them. So actually, technology will help us better utilize our resources, even to the extent of curing diseases as well. Right? So one of the prominent person among the cornucopians, sorry, is beyond lumber. Yeah, beyond lumber. Okay. Um, okay. Overpopulation. Now, how does it occur? Um, Overpopulation occurs when a population is too densely populated. Okay? So we may have, for example, US has more than 300 million people, but the population is based on the area they have. It's not considered overpopulation compared to maybe Bangladesh or some part of Bangladesh with a very high density population. Yeah. So um, it's not so much about the number of people who live in the country, but the size of the country matters there, right? So, related to man-land ratio, the ratio of man to the size of the land. Overpopulation also refers to the ratio of population to the means of subsistence, or means of living. So this one to me is more critical. Yeah, that is the means of subsistence or means of living include all resources considered essential for every for human well-being and production. Now, the example of the resources that we're talking about here include water, fresh air, non-polluted environment, energy, resources, education, capital, and so on and so forth. Okay, so so what are the factors which contribute to population explosion? Um, One is, as we've seen earlier on, is the agricultural advances. Okay, because the production for agriculture has improved and so on. So food supply increase, and so that can support the population as well. So food supply is one. So another one is the advances in medicine. So the improvement in medicine and hospital, um, in healthcare and so on. Yeah, has helped people to live longer. Okay, and another important one is the industrial revolution. That's actually is helping number one in terms of food production. Number two in terms of the living condition and so on and so forth. Yeah, the quality of life is improved. So, okay, so those are factors which have actually contributed to if there is such thing as population explosion. Okay, so if you look at this map here, you will see that not all parts of the world are equally populated. So those countries which have high density, for example, are the one in the dark color. For example, even in the United States, you have certain states like California and some of the northeastern state, uh, northeast state, including Florida, New York, and so on. Yeah? While as in Europe, you do have some black spot there too. And in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and China, yeah, and Vietnam. This is Vietnam, sorry. China, Japan, and some parts of Philippines and Indonesia, Java. Right? So those are the uh, high density areas in the world. Okay, just a bit on this. That in terms of forest cover, there is a correlation between population density and forest cover as well, or forest. Uh, in other words, the amount of forest on the surface of the earth. Yeah? So there seems to be, based on studies, seems to be a consistent declining in the per capita availability of forest. Yeah? If we divide the forest per individual, yeah, per capita, there is a trend with decreasing or declining per capita of availability of forest area. Yeah? So the per capita availability of forest, as you can see from here, shows the decreasing, yeah, trend. Okay, so as population density increase, the forest cover also per capita decrease. Right, this is based on study, and perhaps I think this is district of Kokkaja district, probably in India. Right? Okay. Now, other than that, I think the issue of resources, also with increasing population, there is a danger that the resources would become less and less available. Yeah. So, for example, in 1996, with subsidies provided to farmers and so on, yeah, freshwater subsidies in Bangladesh, Nepal, and Thailand, for example, was so high that the total cost of supplying water was at least 1,000 times, 1,000% of the total revenue that was received by the government. So there is a lot of subsidy provided, yeah, by the government. And overall, 80% of water use in developing countries is dedicated to irrigation, for example. Right? So the demand for water, fresh as well as for the purpose of irrigation and so on. But the lack of investment that cheap water afford farmers contributes to environmental degradation. Now, the peace process of providing cheap uh, water to farmers actually destroy the environment. Yeah, as arable land is exposed to salinization, or alkalization, and water logging, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's how the process of subsidizing, resources, water supplies, contribute to um, we call environmental degradation. So to conclude, um, uh, it is poverty or vicious cycle of poverty rather that helps to perpetuate degradation. Okay, so there are a lot more people who are poor on the earth, the more environmental degradation is likely to occur. Okay, so policy changes defining property rights and access to finance and technology will support environmental preservation regardless of population growth. So if we can improve that, yeah, in terms of the rights of people to property, the access to finance so that they can get rid of themselves out of poverty. That, according to the expert, will more or less support environmental preservation instead of degradation. Yeah. So, but the results of this depend very much on the support from institutions, relevant institutions, both public and also private, yeah, how they respond. So I think this is all that we have for uh, today. Basically, what we're trying to um, uh, explore here is the fact that if we can control population growth, if we can control, you know, population density and so on, that helps a lot in terms of controlling the damage to the environment, okay? Controlling environmental degradation. Okay, so less pressure on the land, less pressure on the forest, less pressure on rivers, and so on and so forth. Right. So thank you very much. I'll see you again in the next lecture. Okay. So the next class that we have will be on population policy, and that will be for the next class that we have. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy this video, and do have comments if you do have, yeah, and let me know. And thank you very much.